Africa didn't just wake up one day and find India everywhere. It happened quietly, strategically, and with precision that the world underestimated. While the big powers were busy playing their old colonial games, India walked through the open door that everyone else ignored. No fanfare, no conquest, no flags planted, just connection, technology, and trust. And that right there is how you build an empire in the modern world. Not through armies, not through intimidation, but through influence, through access, through digital power. Now, let's be real. When people think of Africa's digital revolution, they often picture Chinese roads, American software, or European investment. But the truth is, there's an Indian fingerprint on almost every major African tech transformation today. From mobile banking in Kenya to fiber networks in Nigeria, from solar-powered internet hubs in Ghana to digital education in Rwanda, India has been the silent architect of this transformation. Not by force, but by friendship. Not through loans, but through learning. And that's the genius of this entire move. See, India knows something the West forgot and China never quite learned. That true power doesn't come from owning people. It comes from empowering them. When you give people tools to grow, when you help them dream, you don't have to control them. They choose to walk with you. And that's exactly what's happening between India and Africa today. It started small. In 2008, when most countries were recovering from a financial crisis, India was quietly setting up something called the PAN, African E-Network, a massive digital bridge that connected over 50 African nations with India's hospitals, universities, and government institutions. Imagine that a continent connected to another continent through knowledge and healing. Students from Africa sitting in classrooms virtually taught by professors in Delhi, patients in remote areas consulting with doctors in Chennai and Mumbai. It was revolutionary, and yet India never boasted about it. It wasn't broadcast as a dominance move. It was offered as partnership. That's what made it so powerful. While other global players were negotiating trade terms, India was building relationships. While they were setting up military bases, India was setting up data centers. And while they were counting profits, India was counting progress. This was the quiet birth of a new kind of empire. One built not on land, but on links. Let me tell you something. In today's world, the most valuable real estate isn't territory, it's data. The new oil isn't under the ground, it's in the cloud. The new army isn't soldiers, it's software engineers. And India saw that early. It saw that if you could become the world's digital partner, you didn't need to conquer anyone. They'd come to you willingly. And that's exactly what Africa did. Companies like Airtel Africa, owned by India's Bharti Enterprises, are now running one of the largest telecom networks across the continent, serving more than 130 million users in 14 countries. That's not just connectivity, that's influence. Every call, every text, every transaction, connected through Indian infrastructure. Think about the subtle power in that. When you own the network, you don't have to control the people. The network already connects their future to you. And India didn't stop there. Its tech giants, Infosys, Tech Mahindra, Wipro, TCS, all quietly moved into Africa. Not as exploiters, but as enablers. They trained local coders, hired local talent, built tech hubs in places like Nairobi, Lagos, and Johannesburg. It wasn't a brain drain. It was a brain chain, a partnership of equals, building something sustainable. Because India knows what it means to rise from the ground up. It knows what it means to be underestimated. So instead of preaching development, it demonstrated it. Let's talk about digital payments. While much of the Western world is still figuring out how to include their unbanked populations, India went and shared its own formula for financial inclusion. The Unified Payments Interface, UPI, that transformed India's economy is now being adopted in countries like Mauritius and Kenya. Imagine a farmer in rural Kenya using the same technology as a street vendor in Delhi. That's not coincidence. That's strategy. India isn't just exporting products anymore. It's exporting systems. It's exporting success models. Africa looked at India and saw itself diverse, developing, dynamic. Both have young populations hungry for opportunity. Both have faced colonization, exploitation, and external interference. But both have the same belief that the future doesn't belong to those who control the past, but to those who code the present. India offered the digital public goods, free, open source tools that anyone could use, no strings attached, no conditions, no debt traps. And that made all the difference, because while others came to Africa with contracts, India came with code. And when you give people code, you give them control. Let's pause there for a second, because that's a profound shift in global power. In the 28th century, empires controlled sea roads. In the 21st century, the new empire controls data roads. And India, it's quietly building the data highways of Africa. The cables, the satellites, the payment systems, the cybersecurity frameworks, they all trace back to Indian innovation. And yet India doesn't brag about it. That's what makes it so brilliant. Power that doesn't announce itself is the most stable kind. Because while people are busy looking for dominance, you're busy building dependence, not the negative kind, but mutual interdependence, where your growth fuels their growth and their trust fuels your influence. That's how India plays the long game. Now let's talk about the bigger picture, because this isn't just about economics or technology. This is about rewriting the map of global influence. For decades, Africa has been treated as a battleground between powers. The U.S. wanted to influence it politically. China wanted to dominate it economically. Europe wanted to keep its legacy alive. But India wanted to connect it, to empower it, to collaborate with it. And here's what's fascinating. Africa trusts India. That's rare. Because trust isn't bought, it's built. And India built it over years of mutual respect. Indian doctors working in African hospitals. Indian teachers training local students. Indian entrepreneurs starting joint ventures with local partners. You can't fake that. You can't replace that with money or marketing. When India launched its Voice of the Global South, Initiative Africa was one of the first to respond. Because they knew India doesn't speak down to them, it speaks with them. That's diplomacy rooted in dignity. Now think about what happens next. Because this isn't just a story of the present, it's a vision of the future. Africa is home to the youngest population on Earth. By 2050, 1 in 4 humans will be African. And guess who's helping build their digital identity systems? India, using the same Aadhaar-style framework that revolutionized how Indians access banking, healthcare, and governance. That's not just technology transfer, that's identity transfer. When you help 1 billion people prove who they are digitally, you shape how they participate economically. You define how they interact globally. And when that system carries your blueprint, your standards, your software, then your influence is permanent. You don't have to invade. Your technology already did. Now, there's another layer to this, the moral one. Because let's be honest, most global players approach Africa like a marketplace. India approached it like a mirror. Instead of asking, what can we take? India asked, what can we build together? That's the difference between dominance and destiny. And Africa responded. From Addis Ababa to Accra, from Kigali to Kampala, leaders are turning to India for guidance in cybersecurity, digital education, and fintech regulation. They're not just adopting technology, they're adopting philosophy. The philosophy that development isn't charity, it's collaboration. Let me tell you what's happening quietly behind the scenes. Indian startups are mentoring African startups. Indian policy think tanks are helping African nations draft their digital frameworks. Indian investors are funding innovation ecosystems across the continent. It's a chain reaction of empowerment. And here's the part that shocks most people. India is doing all this without huge publicity, without global campaigns, without flashy branding, because it doesn't need validation. It knows the results will speak for themselves. Look at the numbers. In the last decade, trade between India and Africa has crossed 100 billion. But that's just the surface. Beneath that, there's a network of over 600 Indian companies operating across 54 African nations. From pharmaceuticals to IT, from solar to education, they're quietly rewriting the rules of engagement. This isn't the kind of empire you can see with your eyes. It's the kind you feel with your connection. When a young student in Tanzania logs into an online course hosted on an Indian platform, that's part of it. When a doctor in Ethiopia consults with specialists in Bengaluru through telemedicine, that's part of it. When a farmer in Zambia uses a fintech app built with Indian technology, that's part of it. That's how you build something unstoppable. Not by shouting, but by showing. Not by conquering, but by connecting. And make no mistake, the world is noticing the U.S. is realizing that India's soft power strategy in Africa is outpacing their own diplomatic efforts. China is seeing that its heavy infrastructure projects can't buy the kind of loyalty that trust brings. Europe is beginning to understand that its colonial guilt programs can't compete with partnership-based progress. Because here's the truth. You can buy resources, but you can't buy respect. You can build roads, but you can't build relationships. You can invest in land, but unless you invest in people, it's just another transaction. India invested in people. That's why when Africa talks about digital transformation, India's name comes up with pride, not fear. That's how you know you've built something real. This isn't the old empire of dominance. This is the new empire of development. It doesn't have borders. It doesn't have soldiers. It has servers. It has satellites. It has shared dreams. And once you build an empire of minds, you never lose it. Now, let's be real for a second. This didn't happen by accident. This was deliberate. India realized that its greatest export wasn't software or steel. It was its experience. The journey from poverty to possibility. The struggle from scarcity to scalability. The understanding of what it means to digitize not just systems, but society. Africa saw that and said, that's what we want, not aid, not pity, not lectures, but lessons. And India gave them that openly, humbly, and effectively. This quiet digital revolution across Africa is one of the greatest success stories of our time. Not because of its size, but because of its soul. It proves that you don't need to dominate others to lead them. You just need to serve them with purpose. When history looks back at this century, it won't remember who had the biggest armies. It'll remember who built the biggest networks. And right now, those networks carry an unmistakable Indian pulse. From undersea cables to cloud platforms, from digital IDs to education hubs, the map of Africa's digital rise has India's signature all over it. That's not just influence, that's legacy. And legacy isn't built in headlines, it's built in hearts. India's digital empire across Africa isn't a story of conquest, it's a story of connection. It's the story of a nation that understood early that the most powerful weapon in the world is not fear, it's trust. And the only empire that will survive the test of time is the one built on faith, friendship, and the freedom to grow together. That's what India built. Quietly, brilliantly, unshakably. The empire of the future belongs to those who connect minds, not occupy lands. And India understood that before anyone else, because in this new age, territory doesn't define power anymore. Borders don't limit influence. The new empire is invisible, built through ideas, technology, and human connection. It's not about planting flags on soil. It's about planting trust in hearts. It's not about control. It's about collaboration. And in this quiet revolution, India became the master architect, shaping a global network of minds that stretches from Mumbai to Mombasa, from Delhi to Dakar, from Bengaluru to Botswana. The world's most powerful nations spent decades fighting for dominance through weapons, trade wars, and politics. But India saw something they missed, that the next great power wouldn't be the one that owned the most land or gold, but the one that connected the most people. India looked at its own story, a nation that rose not through conquest, but through intellect, resilience, and innovation, and realized that its strength wasn't in force, but in thought. And when you understand that, you don't need to expand through invasion. You expand through inspiration. That's why India didn't show up in Africa, the Middle East, or Southeast Asia with warships or warnings. It showed up with software, satellites, and education.